What's going on, guys? So next weekend, UFC Fight Night is back. We have, of course, former champion Israel Adesanya versus Imavov. I believe this is probably the first time, maybe ever, that Israel Adesanya has headlined a Fight Night card. So it definitely feels kind of like a demotion for him. Now, I don't think it's a demotion in terms of opponent. I actually think that Imavov is a beast in the middleweight division that is up and coming, and this fight concerns me for Israel Adesanya, if I'm just being honest with you. But I'm not going to get ahead of myself, because I'm going to start from the bottom of the main card and work my way all the way up to the top. Okay, so first off, we got Muhammad Naimov versus Khan Ofli. Now, Khan Ofli, this is actually only his second fight in the UFC. He's 12-3 overall, 2 wins by knockout, 6 wins by submission. He is known to kind of get in firefights, and that does concern me a little bit. He actually took a TKO loss in the second round in the UFC Ultimate Fighter finale to Santos Alves. Brutal left hand, put him right on out. He just fell right down to his knees, lost his first and only fight in the UFC. If you look at his highlights before that, I mean, he does, he's pretty decent at grappling and striking, but what concerns me about him is that he looks like he's trying to hit a home run every time he throws, and he is known to kind of get in the pocket, get in a firefight with guys, and he doesn't seem to be extremely defensively responsible when he does this. Don't get me wrong, you always have a puncher's chance when you're that sort of fighter. Now, he does have 6 wins by submission, but he seems to prefer standing up. Then you have Muhammad Naimov, is 11-3 overall, 6 wins by knockout. So this guy likes to knock people out. Very skilled on the feet, very technical, almost 50% striking accuracy. Not really attempting a whole lot of takedowns, but if you look at his last few fights, he actually lost his last fight to Lima, won his fight before that against Silva, won his fight before that against Nathaniel Wood. I mean, that's a good win. It was a unanimous decision, but Nathaniel Wood is a really, really tough guy. For that, he beat Malarkey. It's also, pretty quality win for him. This guy's a good fighter. He has 3 losses on his record, so he's not cream of the crop in the featherweight division, but he's making a good run there. He's only lost 1 fight out of his 4 in the UFC. With that said, not a lot of wins by submission, mostly by knockouts. I think Khan Ofli, if he wants to get over on Muhammad in this fight, I do feel like he needs to try to take this thing to the ground. He definitely has more experience on the ground. He definitely has more wins by submission, does Khan. I think it pretty much comes down to, if he's able to get Muhammad on the ground, I'm going to go with Khan on this. But like I said, when you look at his highlights, you don't see him going to the ground very much. He seems to like to stand up, and that's how he lost the Ultimate Fighter finale to Santos, standing up with him. And he got caught coming into the pocket with his hands down, and you kind of pick your poison. It kind of reminds me of Michael Chandler in that way. He's a good grappler, good wrestler, but for whatever reason, he seems to tend to want to stand on his feet. And when you get in there with a guy who is, a tighter, cleaner striker than you, like I believe Muhammad Naimov is, 11-3, 6 wins by KO, you get caught with not just your hands down, but with your pants down, and you get knocked out. So I think that Khan is going to go in here like he normally does and get into a firefight with Naimov, and I believe Naimov's going to catch him maybe sometime in the second round and put him out of there. So I'm definitely going with Muhammad Naimov by KO TKO. Moving on up the card, Andre Muniz versus Ikram Alaskarov. Now, this is a really, really good fight. If you look at Andre Muniz is 24-6 overall. Quite a lot of experience, 30 fights overall. Only 4 wins by knockout, 15 by submission. When you look at these guys' records and you see how many wins they have by knockout and how many by submission, that lets you know right there. So he has 15 of his 30 fights are wins by submission, and 15 are first-round finishes. Just think of the psychology behind that. He's coming in there immediately right out of the gate trying to drag you into his world where he has more technique, and he's trying to get you out of there and have an easy, short night. He's not one of these guys to ride it out to a decision. And again, he can knock guys out. He has 4 wins by knockout, but you're talking about 30 total fights and only 4 wins by knockout. And then you got the 15 wins by submission. So obviously, he's looking to take you down. 54 takedowns attempted, only 3 landed. So his accuracy is not that great. But you look at someone like Murad Dvalishvili, his accuracy is not great either. But he's acting like he's going to take you down 100 times in one round. So it's constantly got guys like, oh, doing this, or is he going to shoot? Or is it, constantly got guys putting their hands down to defend the takedown. And then, of course, when guys do that, that opens up the head, for strikes and overhand rights and stuff like that. If you look on over at Ikram Aliskerov, 15-2, only 2 losses, 6 wins are by knockout. So he's got 16 overall fights. 6 of those are by knockout, and then 5 wins by submission. So again, really good finishing rate here. 17 total fights, and 11 of those are finishes. If you look at his last few fights, he actually lost to Whitaker. Whitaker got him out of there pretty quickly. I think the mistake Aliskerov made there was standing up too long in the pocket with a guy like Robert Whitaker. Robert Whitaker obviously has really high-level striking and karate. He made a mistake there. His fight before that, he won, beat Worley Alves. KO, TKO, first round. Fight before that, he won over Phil Hawes. I think with a guy like Muniz, he's going to try to keep it on the feet. I think that he's going to feel like he has an advantage there because Muniz has most of his wins by submission. So I think Aliskerov is going to be trying to stay away from that aspect of Andre's game, and I think he's going to try to keep it on the feet. So if he can keep it on the feet, I'm going to go Aliskerov. Let's go third round TKO. He finally gets him out of there. He's able to shuck off most of the takedown attempts, and Andre's going to be stuck on the feet with him. So that's what I'm going with. Moving on up the card, Vinicius Oliveira versus Said Nurmagomedov. Now this is a good fight. I'm looking forward to this one. Vinicius Oliveira, 21-3 overall. So this guy's got 24 total fights, only 3 losses, 16 wins by knockout. 2/3 of this guy's fights are ending in knockout, only 2 by submission, and 14 first-round finishes. So again, very aggressive, coming in hot, coming in swinging, trying to get you out of there early so he can have an early night. If you look at his last few fights, he's only had 2 in the UFC, but he won his last fight over Ricky Simon. That was a unanimous decision. That's a strong win. Ricky Simon has kind of been a mainstay in that division. Before that, Bernardo Sopai, which he also won KO TKO in the 3rd round. It's going to be a stand-up war. 5 takedowns attempted overall. Only 2 landed. He's not looking to take you down, and he's got 14 first-round finishes. So, and only 2 wins by submission again. So that lets you know he's coming in there hot, coming in there fast, coming in there striking. He's got a really good kick to the liver, really good high kick as well. Very decent boxing for MMA standards. And if you look at Said Nurmagomedov, don't let the last name fool you. He is a good grappler, but he is also very, very efficient as a stand-up fighter. Said Nurmagomedov is 18-3 overall, only 4 wins by knockout. So 21 total fights, but only 4 wins by knockout. 6 wins by submission, 9 first-round finishes. So got a win over Gafarov, beat him by first-round submission. Before that, Jonathan Martinez, that's a unanimous decision. Before that, he beat Kakramanov by submission in the 2nd round as well. So 2 out of his last 3 fights have been submission wins. And then before that, Douglas Silva de Andrade, he beat him. That was a 3rd round unanimous decision. And I remember that fight. That was a war, and a stand-up war as well. So he'll really do either one. He definitely lives up to the Nurmagomedov name. He does have good grappling and quite a few submission wins. If you look at his last, let's just look at his last 5 fights. 1, 2, 3 submission wins out of his last 5 fights in the UFC. Cody Stamann before that beat him by first round submission. So this guy is but then before that, Mark Striegel KO TKO first round. So really this guy can do both. I mean, he can do spinning attacks. I've seen him hit guys with spinning back kicks to the liver, spinning back kicks to the head, spinning back fist. So he has quite a diverse attack that he will use in there. In this particular fight, Vinicius Oliveira is more of a striker. He only has 2 wins by submission, 16 wins by KO. I do see Said Nurmagomedov using his grappling in this particular fight because he's going up against a known, very clinical, vicious striker in Vinicius. So I think Saeed's going to be able to get Vinicius down and probably eventually get him out of there via submission. I think Saeed's going to be able to get Vinicius on the ground. Oliveira, I mean, he's obviously a jiu-jitsu guy. He's got a good last name, obviously, but those jiu-jitsu guys, those shoot box guys, they typically like to stand up if they can help it, and they get their fighter hurt or they get up against a guy who's not really a great grappler but is a good striker and they find themselves in trouble, just like Charles Oliveira, they will climb to the back and kind of use their jiu-jitsu in that way. But Vinicius doesn't typically do that. He's the type of guy that's going to stand up with you if he can, and I definitely think he's going to be trying to keep it on the feet here against Nurmagomedov, but I do see Nurmagomedov looking to take him down pretty quickly. He knows that this guy's a striker. He knows that this guy has a really good record of 21-3. He knows that this guy has 16 KOs. He's going to look to take Vinicius off of his feet pretty quickly and try to get him out of there. I'm going to say submission third round. I don't care how many wins you have by KO. If you're not on your feet and you get taken off of your feet, doesn't really help you a whole lot, So that's what I see happening here. I'm going to say third round submission, Said Nurmagomedov. Moving on up the card, Jairzinho Rozenstruik versus Sergey Pavlovich. Now, this is a tough one. Jairzinho's 15-5 overall, 13 wins by knockout. I mean, he's obviously primarily a striker. You don't see this guy. Let's look at his takedown accuracy. Takedowns attempted, 1. Literally 1 takedown attempted, and he didn't even land that one. So takedown accuracy is literally 0%. Significant strikes attempted 961, significant strikes landed 476. So he has a good about 50% striking accuracy there. But Sergey Pavlovich, you're looking at 18-3 overall, 15 wins by knockout. So 21 total fights, 15 of them by KO. But, I watched some of his highlights before doing these breakdowns. Obviously I've seen all of his fights in the UFC, but just to kind of remind myself. And Sergey is one of those guys that he has scary, scary, scary power. But he showed in the fight against Tom Aspinall that he's also one of those guys that's kind of all he has. I hate to say that's all he has. I mean, he's got, a pretty quick 1-2 for a guy his size, a big, heavy, strong guy like that. And he is one of those guys that if he touches you and puts you out, it can be lights out. But, we've seen, just like with his last fight, he lost against Volkov. When you get in there with a really high-level striker, he's shown in his last 2 fights, it's not really... you start to worry about when you only have just that touch of death and you don't have a really good game plan, foot movement, really good diversity of strikes and that sort of thing. You start worrying about a guy like that when he gets up against someone like Aspinall or Volkov. And, he lost his last fight, unanimous decision to Volkov. Before that, obviously, got knocked out by Aspinall. Before that, he actually won. He beat Curtis Blades, first round KO, TKO. Now, again, Curtis Blades is mostly a grappler, and he was in there trying to take him down. He got clipped. Sergey is a very, very powerful dude. So if he hits you clean, guys just can't recover from it. And then he obviously has a really good finishing instinct where he's just going to come in and swarm you, and then it's going to be over. In this situation, I do see him being able to possibly do that against Jairzinho. Jairzinho is also, in some ways, It's weird, man. He's known as a striker and he's known as a high level striker, but I don't see a lot of high level technique in him, when he fights. And if you look at his last few fights, he lost to Gelson Almeida, no shame in that. He got grappled to death the whole time. Rosenstrike's not a grappler. Obviously, he won his last fight against Gaziv. Is that how you say his name? Gaziv, fourth round KO, TKO. And before that, he beat Tai Tuivasa, which decent win, but hasn't aged really, really well because Tai Tuivasa now, we used to think when he was doing the shoeies and this thing, 2 or 3 years back, Tuivasa was a force to be reckoned with, but he's been losing quite a few of his fights recently, and I think now everybody's kind of seeing him in hindsight as more of a brawler, more of a guy who just carries a lot of power and's got a good right hand and is deceivingly quick for a guy that's his size and got some pudge on his body. So I think same thing with Tai Tuivasa when he gets in there with anybody who, has a good skill set from the striking realm, he seems to lose. So, Rosenstrike's won 3 out of his last 4. Obviously, he lost to Volkov as well several fights ago. So again, Rosenstrike, Sergey Pavlovich, both of them are dangerous. Both of them have power, but both of them have lost to Volkov. When they get in there against a guy who really has good high-level striking and is very, very well trained and defensively sound, they don't seem to perform that well. Because of that, this is actually kind of a tough one to call. Sergey Pavlovich is on a 2-fight losing skid. That could make a difference here. He's 18-3 overall, and 2 of those 3 losses have come within his last 2 fights. So he's not going to want to go on a 3-fight skid, especially seeing as how, he was talked about as possibly fighting for a championship a year ago. So I think that Sergey's really going to be wanting to come in here and get Rosenstrike out of there. I definitely don't see this going to a decision. Let's go Sergey Pavlovich, first round knockout. Let's say he catches Jairzinho, catches him up against the fence with something, hurts him. Jairzinho goes down, and the ref has to step in and stop it. I'm just going to go there. Michael Page versus Shara Magomedov. The Bullet. This is a really tough one to call. Obviously, Michael Venom Page, this will only be it's only his second or third fight in the UFC. That's right. He had that one against Ian Gary where he lost unanimous decision. Kind of a boring fight, to be honest with you. Page is one of those guys. He's got some of the craziest highlight reel finishes of anybody in the game. And if you didn't watch the sport regularly, you would look at someone like that and his highlight reel and you would think, oh man, yeah, I'm in for a treat, man. This is going to be good. But then he's also known when he gets in there with people who are really good like he is to kind of shit the bed a little bit. Like that fight against Kevin Holland, he obviously won it by unanimous decision, fair enough, but, it's kind of a boring fight. He's got the same, 2-3 things, and it's crazy because he's a high-level striker. He has more diversity in his attack than he's showing, but I think he's one of those people that there's certain things that he tends to land well and certain things that he tends to rely on, I guess, more so than others. He's got that jump in, spinning back elbow that he does. He's got a good 1-2. He's got a good slip, pull 2. Obviously, decent kicks for, kickboxing guy. This is a tough one, man. Because obviously you look at Bullet overall. This guy's 15-0. He hasn't lost, and 12 wins by KO. So 15 total fights, 12 wins by knockout. Don't let the wandering eye fool you. This dude is a beast, and 7, so half of his fights are also first round finishes. No grappling threat whatsoever with this guy. I hear he actually can grapple really well, but no threat. 65% striking accuracy. He is truly a placement guy. He finds weaknesses. He's the kind of guy that downloads data, feints a lot, draws out reactions from you, sees where your weak places are, and then places shots based on that. This is a tough one to call because obviously, a guy like MVP just has tons of experience. You look at a 15-0 guy and you always think, well, they're going to meet their match one day. But usually there's something special about those guys, that there's a reason that they're 15-0. If you look at his last fight against Petrosian, won that by TKO, second round. His fight before that, Oleg Jacek, unanimous decision win. For that, Tricoli, third round KO TKO's fight before that, unanimous decision, but that was against Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva's a tough opponent, and that was actually his first fight in the UFC. So he's got 2 unanimous decision wins and 2 KO TKO wins. So Magomed is one of those guys that he wants to put you out, but if he's up against somebody that's, really good and is a really strong striker, he will be okay with just kind of sitting on the outside and picking at you and picking his shots and stuff like that. That's why this fight concerns me a little bit. It's a very, very top of the food chain, high level fight, but I'm concerned it's going to be a snooze fest. I hate to say that. Just sometimes it is, man. When you get guys who are just both of them really, really good like this, both of them really, really defensive. You got a guy like MVP who, kind of stands on the outside and bounces with his hands down and stuff like that. But he's been fighting for so long and he's so experienced and so good with that karate, taekwondo sort of style. He's always in it. And plus he's tall for that division. I think he's like 6'3" maybe. So he's got the height advantage and more than likely the reach advantage as well. He's so good at standing on the outside and staying out of range, and that makes it tough for guys to really land on him. So the reason I'm concerned this fight might be boring is because you have 2 guys who have kind of similar styles, in the sense that Magomedov likes to stand on the outside and pick his shots. MVP likes to stand on the outside and pick his shots. It's going to be one of those fights where, okay, who's going to go first? Who's going to actually risk something here? Who's actually going to be the one to go in and assert themselves on the other guy? I think I see Magomed doing that and being more willing to do that than I do MVP. For some reason, MVP for the longest time was the man over in Bellator. Obviously he's made it to the UFC, he's made it to the big leagues. All he's had so far is Kevin Holland, and then he had the decision loss to Ian Gary, of course. But prime example, that fight against Ian Gary. I feel like MVP could have beaten Ian Gary if he would have been willing to step into the fire a little more. He's one of those guys that just likes to stay on the outside, does not like to crush that space. He doesn't like guys to be able to get on the inside of that void with him, and he's really good at moving and scattering from one side to the other when guys start to kind of come in on him. And I see him doing that here. I'm gonna say that these guys are going to be staying away from each other a little bit too much for there to be any sort of knockout. Now, it's possible. Magomedov won his last fight by KO TKO, but, Petrosian was willing to come in the pocket. Petrosian was willing to kind of put himself in the pocket and harm's way a little bit, and I just don't think MVP is going to be willing to do that. And I'm really terrified that we're going to get to this fight that should be an amazing high-level banger fight, and then we're just going to have 2 guys both standing on the outside trying to throw high kicks and spinning elbows the whole night. I hope not. I hope I'm proven wrong, and I hope Magomedov takes it to him, and I think if he does, I do believe that he can finish MVP. But again, MVP's got so many fights, so much experience, so much high-level experience. I just don't know if Magomedov is going to be able to finish him that way. But I will say this is a really good test for an undefeated guy like Magomedov. 15-0. If he can get through MVP, I think it's pretty safe to say, he's right there. He's ranked number 14 right now. So I think definitely with a win over MVP, that puts him in the top 10. one more fight after that, he's looking at a top contender fight. And then, moving ahead towards a title. I mean, in that division, middleweight, that's a tough division. A lot of good guys at the very front of that division right now. So, they're moving him along kind of slowly. He's definitely a star in the making. Got the crazy eye that makes him stand out. He's a ginger guy. He's one of those guys that looks like he shouldn't even be able to see you, but then he's piecing up high level guys in the UFC. So obviously he's very, very talented. So I'm going to say that Magomedov is going to win this by decision. I just think he has a more diversity of strikes than MVP. I take that back. I don't think he has a more diversity of strikes than MVP, but I think he uses more of a diversity of strikes in his fights. He uses boxing, he uses kicks, low and high and middle. And MVP just doesn't really use but a few different things, and the rest of it's just bouncing on the outside, and I mean, ton of respect for the guy, obviously, but when you get up against these high level guys in the UFC like that, every win for you is not going to be some guy diving in for his leg and it boom hits him with a knee and then just doesn't even bother looking at him, standing looking the other way like a statue. Like, bro, every win is not going to be that way, especially when you get in the UFC against these top guys, elite level guys, all these, top guys in the world. And I think sometimes Michael Venom Page is too worried about just looking cool and not getting hurt and not getting knocked out. I think he has a fear of getting slept because he's always kept this kind of mystique of, being really evasive and his highlight reel is just, it's wow, pretty much it's wow. And I think he's scared to be on the other end, the receiving end of a highlight. He feels like if he goes into the pocket with some of these guys that could happen to him. So he plays it really, really, really safe sometimes. And that makes him a little bit of a stinker to watch, if I'm being honest with you. But I do think that Magomedov, based on his diversity of striking, I think he remains undefeated here. I think he'll get through MVP. And it's probably going to be by decision, though. Moving on up the card, Nasruddin Imavov, Israel Adesanya. I think that Imavov, 15-4 overall, 6 wins by knockout, 4 by submission. You look at Israel Adesanya, obviously he's lost 2 in a row, but to top guys. I mean, definitely Nasruddin, his toughest fight has obviously been against Jared Cannonier and then Brendan Allen. What is he ranked? He's ranked number 5. He's one of those guys that really likes to crush the space and get on the inside. And Israel Adesanya, he's so much more effective when he fights someone who is willing to play his game. Like Robert Whittaker and Kelvin Gastelum, and Robert Whittaker, Kelvin Gastelum, both are very good high-level strikers, but Israel Adesanya has certain intangibles that they don't, the height, the reach, the quickness with the strikes and stuff like that. And he, again, much like, I mean, their styles are different, but much like MVP, Israel Adesanya is more a guy that kind of stands on the outside. Although, listen, the fight against Dricus, I gotta say, Israel surprised me a little bit in that fight. He showed that he was more willing to make it a little down and dirty and get in there and get in the pocket and make it a little more grimy. So I think maybe he learned a lesson there in that fight against Strickland where he was such a favorite and then he ended up losing that fight. And I think a big reason that he lost that fight was just inactivity. He just wasn't doing anything. Throwing a high kick every once in a while, and I know a lot of that is due to Strickland and his teep and his good jab and, really strong defense with the Philly shell style that he has and all that. But I don't know. I think that it really depends on what kind of fight Israel Adesanya makes it. And I think if he is willing to make it dirty and he's willing to get inside with Imavov some, that I think he can get Imavov out of there, and I think he can win this. But If he tries to do his usual, stay on the outside, leg kick, head kick, somebody to a decision, I don't see it working out for him, because Imavov's one of those guys that punches his way into the pocket, and then once he gets in there, he's swinging hooks, uppercuts. That's how he hurt Jerry Cannonier. And I just think that he's one of those guys that's not going to be okay with standing on the outside with Israel Adesanya. He's not. He's going to force the pace, force the fight, and he has a really good pace. And I just think that, unfortunately, guys, I think this is kind of where Izzy starts doing this. I hate to say that. I think this could be the kind of the beginning of the end. Now, listen, there's obviously a lot of guys in the middleweight division that Izzy can still beat, but I think we're seeing kind of the changing of the tide, changing of the guard there in the middleweight division. And I think Izzy's style of just being mainly a striker, is somewhat one-dimensional. I don't think that's going to serve him well in this fight. I think Imavov is just, the pace is just too grueling, and he is one of those guys that really sets that grueling sort of pace. And I see that being a problem for Izzy. Yeah, I see that being a problem for Izzy. So I'm going to say Nasruddin Imavov is going to win this by 5-round unanimous decision. I think he's going to be able to do enough by grabbing onto and clinching with Israel Adesanya, where he's going to stifle the offense of Izzy pretty well, and Izzy is going to spend most of his time in defensive mode and trying to deflect any offensive, like, clinch and ground attack of Imavov. And I think his time's going to run out on him. And I just think that I don't think Imavov's only going to attack the clinch and the ground. I think he's also going to attack standing up. Like I said, he's not going to sit on the outside like Robert Whitaker and Kelvin Gastelum and try to play Israel Adesanya's game. He's going to force his way in. Okay? Force his way into that pocket. And I think that's where he wins this fight. I don't think Izzy is as good in that sort of fight when guys don't play his game with him. And I see Imavov just putting a pace on him that Izzy's just going to eventually kind of be drowned and overcome in that fight. And I don't think he'll knock him out. I don't think Imavov would knock him out, which could be wrong. Could be wrong. He's got 19 fights overall and 6 of the wins by knockout, so he's not a really high-level knockout artist, but and only 4 wins by submission. I mean, so, it's hard to say with him whether it's going to be a decision or some sort of finish, but I think he definitely beats Israel Adesanya. 5-round, unanimous decision, Imavov. That's what I'm going with. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Please, if you would, subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment down below, and let me know what you guys think, who you're picking on some of these fights. And yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you on the next one. All right, peace.